Devin Dwyer at Detroit's historic Fox Theater. Round 2 of the Democratic presidential primary debates tonight on this stage. Who's on stage? What's at stake? And are Democrats moving too far to the left? An architect of President Obama's 2012 re-election campaign joins us live. Plus,
did you hear about the tweets?
Oh gosh, yes. How can we not?
The race card. We visit one of the largest Arab American communities in the country for how they're responding to the race-based rhetoric on both sides. And Motor City Blues, another GM factory closing just a few miles from here.
They don't have our back like we have their back.
What's at stake? How is this city plotting a revival with or without politicians? Right now in the briefing room.
Everybody, great to have you with us. I'm Devin Dwyer. We are inside the spin room here, just outside the Fox Theater in Detroit. A big evening ahead, the first of a 2-night debate doubleheader. The field hasn't gotten any smaller. There are still 20 candidates we'll see over the next 2 nights, 10 of them tonight. It's all about Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren tonight. And to talk more about this field, we have our political experts here at ABC News. Our political director, Rick Klein, is here. Mike Muse, our ABC News contributor and host of the Mike Muse Show on Sirius XM, is here. Guys, big night ahead.
Yes. Yeah, it's a big one. It's round 2, part 1, and we know that the Democrats mixed it up a couple of weeks ago over in Miami. The stakes in a lot of ways are higher now because there's fully half of the folks out there today that don't know if they've got another ticket to one of these. And for a lot of the front runners who took fire over the last couple of weeks, this is a chance to show that you can shoot back.
And let's take a look at the field who's going to be on stage tonight. There are 10 candidates tonight. As we said, the 2 big progressives in this race will be front and center. A heck of a lot of moderates on there too, Mike. This is going to be the revenge of the moderates coming right at the 2 folks center stage.
It is, man. I'm so excited. I felt like Miami was a dress rehearsal. And so I feel like Detroit is like the main stage now. I feel like everyone got their one-liners out. Everyone's rehearsing. Everyone saw the tricks that everyone has in their bags. I think everybody's going to bring it tonight.
Yeah,
and
the
I'm really excited for that.
elbows have been coming out on the campaign trail before this for sure. So it's going to be a good night. Had both of you guys have some things that our viewers should watch tonight. 3 things each. Let's start with you, Rick. 3 smart takes.
Sure, yeah. My big one is left in the middle. Now, you've got the whole progressive center of the party right there, center stage, the 2 front runners. Big deal when you have Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. I talked a little bit earlier to Bernie Sanders' campaign manager, and he told our colleague Adam Kelsey tonight is not the night that he's going to mix it up with Elizabeth Warren. They're expecting to almost team up as these other guys come at them. That brings us to the second point, the idea of last chances. There are a whole lot of folks there that know that they've got to make a splash if they want to qualify for the next debate in September right here on ABC News.
Your analysis, Rick, found that at least half the field right now haven't qualified for that second debate yet.
That's right. Only 7 have made it, so that means 13 of the folks out there. A couple others are close, but more than half don't know if this is going to be the last time they're going to be before the American people in a forum like this. So they need to show why they deserve another look. They're about to enter the long, hot summer months where your fundraising is going to dry up if you're not able to make it happen.
And that third one there.
Yeah, the last one I'd bring up is red state, blue states. And this is an interesting one because, first of all of the candidates of color are stacked tomorrow night. So everyone out there is white men and white women. But they represent really different parts of the country. You've got Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren from neighboring Massachusetts and Vermont, as blue as they come. But look at the rest of the stage. You've got candidates from Colorado, Ohio, Montana, Minnesota, Texas. These are places where it's a lot different and maybe a lot more difficult. Indiana, Mayor Pete, a lot harder to run as a Democrat in those places. So there's going to be a lesson for the folks in the middle about what it takes to win everywhere.
It's a tough audience, Mike, tonight in this city. It's going to be filled with Detroiters there in the Fox Theater. You were there earlier.
First of all, I have to say it's good to be home. So I'm originally from Lansing, Michigan. And so being in Detroit, being in the Fox Theater, I used to grow up there and go to a lot of concerts there. The Fox Theater is very magical. Detroit is a very magical place. And Rick, you teed me up perfect for my 3 hot takes. Really talking about the Midwest states, Klobuchar, you have Mariane, and then you have Mayor Pete. That's really what I want to talk about is the future of work. The future of work is really what's at stake right now. And so we can look at Detroit manufacturing, right? The southeast state of Michigan is full of manufacturing companies that are going under. In particular, there's an announcement that got made that a manufacturing plant in Detroit and Macomb County, which actually went Trump, is actually going to close on Thursday, just a couple of days after this debate concludes. And so where are we with that?
Today,
So I'm curious to see how does Warren respond back to this. She had some interesting points on the future of work, and she sees how about we turn these manufacturing manufacturing assemblies and plants that are empty and create better green jobs and green manufacturing, right? But I'm curious to see how does Tim Ryan respond to that, right? How does Mayor Pete respond to that, particularly in Indiana where we saw the steel industry go belly up. The next thing I'm interested in really looking at is race. As we all know, Detroit plays a huge part in the state of Michigan if the Democrats are going to take the state back and be blue again.
And that's something that's a big difference from the first debate. I mean, this was sort of lurking out there in the debate, but now it is front and center across this race.
It is, and particularly with the backdrop of Detroit being a majority black city, right? And in particular about the rhetoric of race dynamics that we've had in the conversation with President Trump. Where are we now within the race? And this can't be denied. The elephant in the room no longer is just an elephant, but actually is a real question that must be addressed and must be asked.
And what's your last?
The last thing is Detroit versus everybody. It was a great slogan that was created by an individual in Detroit named Tommy Walker Jr. We've all seen it on the clothes, and everybody has kind of adopted it in their own way. But I think it's going to be Biden versus everybody right now. I think Biden is the main guy that everyone is gunning for. He's not going to be on the stage tonight, but I guarantee you he will definitely be on the stage all day today.
And he'll probably be watching it tonight for sure. Rick Klein will be here with us all night long. Mike Muse as well. You'll be back later in the show. Thanks a lot, guys. Also, Irene Shar, political reporter, is here in the spin room. She's going to show us around and what's in store a little later tonight. Hey, Irene.
Hey, Devin. Yeah, we are right underneath this tent, right next to Hockeytown Cafe. Right after the debates, the candidates will be walking from Fox Theaters across the street, right through that door right there. They'll be coming right through here into this room. It is called the Spin Room. You might be wondering, what is the Spin Room? It's the most honestly named room that you can imagine, right? Candidates and aides, they come into this room to spin, to give the best possible version of what happened on stage. Okay, so who's going to be here tonight? Well, we know for sure that Steve Bullock is going to be here. He did not, of course, make it to the debate last month. Mariane Williamson also says she's going to be here. Beto O'Rourke and Elizabeth Warren, they came into the spin room last month. We'll see if they come in here again tonight. Pete Buttigieg was noticeably absent last time around. His campaign said that he made his case on stage, so we'll see if he comes back in this room this time around. But I want to give you an idea of just what this room is like, right? We're going to be chasing after these candidates when they come in here. This room is tiny compared to what it looked like last month. It's roughly half the size, in fact, of what the NBC room looked like. In fact, you can see right over here a lot of reporters sitting around. It is combined with the press area into the spin room right here. And Devin, just to give you an idea of how small it is, and just the time that I was talking, I can make it right over to you, right? You can see just how small it is.
It is small.
It is a tiny, tiny room. So we're going to have a lot of fun tonight just chasing.
And you're going to be making your spin room debut, Doreen Shaw. It's going to be get in there and get some tough elbows. It's going to be crowded tonight. Thanks so much, Doreen. Well, the field isn't actually getting any smaller as we head into debate. We talked a little bit about it with Rick Klein and Mike Muse there. The field is actually holding its own, getting a little bit larger. You may notice a difference this week. We have lost Congressman Eric Swalwell of California. He was famous for, of course, that pass the torch meme he launched against Joe Biden. We've also gained Ton Steyer, the billionaire, and we gained Joe Sestak of Pennsylvania, the former congressman. He's in the race as well. Here's a look at the horse race. New Quinnipiac poll out this week. Look at that. Joe Biden well ahead. Warren, Harris, Sanders holding their own in the middle of the pack there, keeping those first debate bounces. Buttigieg rounding out the top five. But as Democrats duke it out amongst themselves, there's a real concern among some party leaders that they're not focused enough on Donald Trump or those key battleground states where this race is really going to matter. I want to bring in now two experts who have been tracking those states. Ben LaBolt is the former national press secretary for President Obama's 2012 re-election campaign. We can call him something of an architect of the president's re-election bid. Also joined by Jeffrey Skelly with our friends at 538. He joins us from New York. Guys, great to have you with us. Thanks so much. Ben, I want to start with you. A pretty ominous headline in a new column from you in the Atlantic magazine. You say the general election is happening today. Donald Trump is running unopposed. So tell us what you mean by that. Where's the party failing right now?
Well, you know, I don't blame the primary candidates for that. I think they've got to focus on the proximate battle without overshooting the runway for the general election. But at the same time, the Trump re-election campaign has staffed up. They've fundraised and they've been advertising in battleground states with an eye towards the general election. I feel strongly that we shouldn't let them have a free year. That's what we had on the Obama campaign in 2011 when we worked swiftly to define Mitt Romney during the primaries and make it very difficult for him to win the general election. He started with a big uphill battle, and I don't want that to happen to Democrats this time around. Since I wrote that column, Democratic super PACs have begun to advertise in key battleground states, which I think is a great first step. I'd love to see the Democratic National Committee do more. The fact is that the Trump campaign is up with digital advertising in key states today, from channels from Facebook to YouTube, talking about their immigration messaging, talking about their general election messaging. And until a couple of weeks ago, it had gone completely unresponded to.
Yeah, and Ben, we have seen Priorities USA, one of those Democratic groups, come out front in some of those key states just the past couple of days. What do you make of Tom Steyer, the billionaire who just got into this race? He started running ads as well, a lot of them in the digital space, including this one. Take a look here, the first ad of the campaign season to use some of Bob Mueller's testimony in it. Is that the kind of thing you think will help Democrats as they start to engage with Donald Trump?
Well, I think it's important that we define Donald Trump now. His approval rating hasn't approached 50% in his presidency, and I think that's because he hasn't followed through on his promises to working class families. Ultimately, he campaigned as a warrior for them, but the only major legislation he passed was a corporate tax cut. And at the same time, we've seen that his administration has been rife with cronyism and corruption. So I think we've got to link it to the average American's life and the conversation that they're having around the dinner table every night.
And maybe that means moving away from things like the Russia investigation, which people have heard an awful lot of. Let's bring Jeffrey Skelly into the conversation. Jeffrey, you and the team at 538 have been taking a look at some of those issues Ben was talking about, and also raising some concern that perhaps Democrats are moving too far to the left on things like health care, immigration, and taxes. What are you finding?
Well, I think generally speaking, you could see historically that candidates that have been, more toward the middle have generally won. So I guess there is some concern that if Democrats go too far to the left, that might give President Trump an opportunity to sort of make the election a choice election. And I think for him, that would be a good option. He could go after someone like Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren for just being too far to the left. Versus it being a referendum, because I think at the same time, you can't say that a left-wing candidate couldn't win because President Trump is pretty unpopular, has approval rating in the low 40s, and people have very strong opinions about him. And you see polls where majorities of Americans say they definitely won't vote for him. So I think you could sort of see it going either way there, but there is some risk that you'll get a choice election if you're Democrats if you do nominate someone who's a bit further to the left.
And Ben, what do you make of the role of the white working class, non-college educated voter? President Obama won over those voters in 2012. Donald Trump sort of won them back. We're calling them the unicorn voters out here in Michigan. Are they winnable by the Democratic nominee? What do Democrats need to do to win those voters over?
Well, look, I think they're an important demographic, but they're not the only important swing demographic in this election. I think they are winnable. I think Trump's trade war that has affected many of them, particularly those in the agricultural sector, are certainly winnable. If you look at his racist rhetoric over the past couple of weeks, that's alienated moderate suburban swing voters. But I also think that we want a candidate that's motivational enough to get out some of the Democrats and younger voters that didn't vote in 2016. I think winning that margin of voters will be just as important to getting to 270 electoral votes as the white working class.
A big debate right now to get turnout up. Ben LaVolt, former National Press Secretary for President Obama's re-election campaign, Democratic strategist now. Thanks so much, Ben, for coming in, for your expertise. Also, thanks to Jeffrey Skelly with our friends at 538. Much more of their analysis at 538.com. Much more ahead from our team here in Detroit coming up after this short break. Stay with us here on ABC News Live.
ABC News, straightforward.
What's the most innovative daily news podcast out there to listen to every day? Well, the Edward R. Murrow Awards say it's Start Here, the daily news podcast from ABC News. Even the New York Times calls us a top news podcast worth listening to. So if you like getting behind the biggest news stories of the day, inside all the details, the backstory, and what will happen next, then listen to Start Here, the daily news podcast from ABC News. It's like no other news podcast out there. Even the critics agree. Listen free on Apple Podcasts.
This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live, the 24/7 streaming news source from ABC News. Breaking news, live events, streaming nonstop. Original breakthrough storytelling from ABC News, National Geographic, ESPN, and it's all designed differently for you to stream straight to any screen whenever you want. Free ABC News Live. Stream it now or anytime on Roku, Hulu, Facebook, and abcnews.com.
Doctor. Potatoes. Ismail? Yes. David.
Over ground zero from Hurricane Michael.
You can see just home after home.
David, nice to meet you.
This was your view.
My favorite view.
Thank you very much.
The world may feel out of your control, but your happiness doesn't have to be. Learn the secrets to happiness. Listen to the 10% Happier podcast, free on Apple Podcasts.
We all need someone who'll pull no punches and give it to us straight. No bull, no spin. Now imagine getting your news like that. Just give it to me straight. ABC News, straightforward.
And welcome back to Detroit. The shooting in Gilroy, California over the weekend is another reminder of just how much gun violence is front and center in this political debate. What can be done to prevent it? Are there plans out there on the Democratic side that can be passed quickly and make a difference? Well, Chris Brown joins us now. She's president of the Brady Campaign, a leading gun safety group, and has been studying the proposals of this broad Democratic field. Chris, great to see you. A lot of options on the table right now. Give us a sense of the spectrum that these candidates' policy proposals on guns range.
They range a wide variety, actually. All of the candidates that we'll hear from tonight at some level have embraced some aspects of gun violence prevention. I think the two candidates running with the strongest platforms are both Senator Harris and Senator Booker. And they take different approaches. Senator Harris released a plan that really calls for executive action. It says that if Congress doesn't take action to comprehensively address gun violence prevention in her first 90 days as president, then at the end of that time, she will issue executive orders to address a range of issues, from background check expansion to enforcement of laws to ensuring that things like the boyfriend loophole that allow unmarried domestic abusers still to obtain guns in too many states without a background check. She will take action to
Chris, I want to ask you about that.
Yeah.
She's been applauded for that proposal. It's certainly a bold one and sets her apart from some of the other candidates. Do you think that using executive action to do things like expanding background checks can withstand legal scrutiny? And is this something that Brady, say, ever suggested to President Obama to do during his presidency?
That's a great question. Yes, we've analyzed all of these proposals, and we support everything that is put forward in Senator Harris's proposal, and we do think that would withstand legal scrutiny, and there is precedent for this. President Obama actually did take executive action around the issue of gun violence prevention. He issued orders, albeit in the waning days of his presidency. Unfortunately, President Trump has upended many of those within the first 60 days of him taking office. I think when you have an issue like this,
he's taken a lot of heat. Yeah, he sure has. Not to cut you off there, but he sure has taken a lot of heat from the gun rights groups. So, but wanted to ask you about Joe Biden, who served alongside President Obama. As you know, Obama vigorously attacked the NRA, faulted them for blocking many of the proposals that you've put on the table. I was struck by something Joe Biden said in the last debate. He said, "Our enemy is the gun manufacturers, not the NRA." What did you make of that?
I think that Joe Biden, what he said, I absolutely 100% agree with. Look, the reality is that the NRA does not represent average gun owners in this country. They exist to make more profits for the gun industry. And that's exactly what Joe Biden, who with all of his experience knows very well. And during his time in the Senate, he was a champion for things like the assault weapons ban. I'd like to see him, though, on the stage embrace a more comprehensive approach and describe what he will do to end the epidemic of gun violence. I haven't seen him do that yet, and I'm anxious to hear from him.
We'll see him tomorrow night, and no doubt the gun violence is likely to come up, particularly in the wake of that shooting. Did want to ask you before we let you go, Chris, about two candidates who have previously had A ratings with the NRA. Might surprise some of our Democratic viewers. Senator Kirsten Gillibrand of New York, Tim Ryan, also Congressman Tim Ryan also had them previously. They both now come out in support of some gun safety measures, but they claim that having that edge with the NRA, at least previously, will help them, give them an advantage to sort of tackle the gun violence issue. Do you think that's fair?
I'm not sure I would agree with that statement. I think as a gun violence prevention organization, what I would say about their records is that there is always room for people to evolve around this issue. Certainly both candidates now, their positions are entirely consistent with what Brady supports. I think there is no inconsistency with being an A+ gun violence prevention rated candidate and being consistently supported by gun owners. We saw in the 2018 election a huge shift in the House of Representatives with veterans, combat veterans, running and winning on a strong gun violence prevention platform, people like Jason Crow. And I think there's no reason to assume that there's any inconsistency with being strong on our issue and being supported by a vast majority of the electorate, whether you own guns or not.
Gun violence prevention arguably more front and center in a presidential campaign than any time in our history. It is a fascinating and important debate, as we saw, particularly in light of that shooting in California over the weekend. Chris Brown, president of the Brady campaign, thanks so much, Chris, for joining us this afternoon. And we'll have much more ahead from our team here in Detroit, Michigan on round 2 of the Democratic presidential primary debates coming up right after this.
ABC News, straightforward.
Doctors, potatoes. Ismail? Yes. David.
Over ground zero from Hurricane Michael.
You can see just home after home.
David, nice to meet you.
This was your view.
My favorite view. Thank you very much.
Okay, imagine the morning. I'm talking about a good morning. Imagine starting your day off with friends. What's better than that? You know, like the crazy smart friend who always keeps you in the know. The friend with the huge heart and smile who just makes everything better. Imagine hearing from people who open your eyes and your heart. Imagine knowing what's coming next in the day ahead. Well, I get to live this each morning together with you. Imagine that. How blessed am I? And that's what makes it such a good morning, America.
The world may feel out of your control, but your happiness doesn't have to be. Learn the secrets to happiness. Listen to the 10% Happier podcast, free on Apple Podcasts.
What's the most innovative daily news podcast out there to listen to every day? Well, the Edward R. Murrow Awards say it's Start Here, the daily news podcast from ABC News. Even the New York Times calls us a top news podcast worth listening to. Start Here, free on Apple Podcasts.
What you're seeing right now, this is part of the eye wall.
This procession of migrants goes back 2 miles.
There is going to be catastrophic damage.
This fire has made a run. You can see those flames shooting up into the sky.
We are on the jam-packed red carpet.
To the right, guys.
So this is the 4th weekend of protest.
Watch ABC News on location for Facebook Watch every day.
Welcome back to Detroit. Devin Dwyer here with our Chris Donato, political reporter, who is tracking a bunch of candidates out there today. Also, our Beatrice Peterson joins us live from outside the Fox Theater. The candidates, guys, are getting ready tonight. Chris, you were in Miami as well. You saw those candidates doing push-ups. They were eating power bars. A lot of them are inexperienced with debating, so we see them taking some special steps. What do we know about what's going on for tonight?
You know, a lot of tonight, they've been a little quiet about how they've been preparing for tonight this go-around. Senator Gillibrand posted pictures on her Instagram page, just her at a desk with some papers talking to staff. But otherwise, they've been relatively quiet. A few candidates say they haven't really changed their routine from last time. They just want to focus on the issues they know best.
And you caught up with Tim Ryan a little bit earlier as well. He's the congressman that's going to be off in the wings tonight. He'll be out there with Mariane Williamson. A lot riding on this debate for Tim Ryan.
Tim Ryan, we asked him, how important is tonight? You're not currently on the next debate stage. Are you worried? How are you going to break through? He told us you'll just have to watch and see what happens tonight. But he says he's not worried. He doesn't think today is a do or die scenario for him. He says he's just going to focus on the issues he knows best, which are trade and manufacturing.
And certainly issues that resonate in this part of the country, in Michigan, in the Rust Belt, in Wisconsin, where the Democrats will have their national convention. Beatrice Peterson has been tracking a number of candidates today as well, including Mariane Williamson, who she caught up a little bit earlier. Beatrice, how is Mariane preparing for tonight?
Well, Mariane is doing something that a lot of candidates aren't doing. She's a little bit different from most of the other 20 that are debating over the next 2 days, over today and tomorrow, excuse me. She is not a politician. She, tonight, though, is going to have a watch party, just maybe a minute's walk from the debate stage, which is a little bit different than most candidates. A lot of the candidates in Miami chose to go to their debate watch parties after hitting the stage. Mariane, she's going to the party before hitting the stage.
I like that style, Beatrice. I would like to be that kind of a campaign reporter, the party before the debate. I think we should do that. What else is happening outside the theater there? Show us what's going on. Give us a sense of the action.
Well, outside the theater, we have a line of people who are waiting to get inside. The police just announced a few moments ago they are locking this down. If you don't have that special credential to get into here, you have to go. However, there's a few party goers who are getting ramped up. Like I said, the Mariane debate party is just a few steps away. And a number of candidates have been walking in and out of the debate hall trying to get a sense of what it's going to be like tonight. So one of them was Mayor Pete Buttigieg, who gave a high five to Hickenlooper earlier as they both went around and looked at what the stage is going to look like tonight. So it's a very close-knit group around here. They're locking the streets down, and everyone's getting a chance to see what might be coming tonight, and everyone's anticipating the future.
Yeah, we were told by the CNN officials about 3,500 guests in the crowd tonight, a lot of them including supporters of the various campaigns, their staffs, also some local Detroiters, Chris, who are in town, get a chance to see the politics, the theater, the circus come to their town. Give us a sense of how the campaign embeds are preparing tonight. You guys have spent your life on the trail. There's an army of political reporters here in this room and across the country right now covering these candidates, largest field in history. What's it like getting ready for tonight?
We've been studying their records for months now, just making sure any changes we can notice, we notice right away. So we've been studying their records, just following them around town and just trying to get a sense of how they're doing and what their staffs are portraying for tonight.
And a big fact check operation as well after these debates for sure. Chris Donato, thank you so much. Beatrice Peterson outside the historic Fox Theater here in Detroit. Both will be covering tonight's debate and joining us here on ABC News Live after the fact for some analysis and reporting. Thanks for joining us here on ABC News Live. We will be back after this short break with much more ahead, including a look at the auto industry here in Detroit and what one of the largest Muslim communities in the country has to say about those racist attacks by President Trump. Stay with us.
ABC News, straightforward. This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live, the 24/7 streaming news source from ABC News. Breaking news, live events, streaming nonstop. Original breakthrough storytelling from ABC News, National Geographic, ESPN, and it's all designed differently for you to stream straight to any screen whenever you want. Free. ABC News Live. Stream it now or anytime on Roku, Hulu, Facebook, and abcnews.com.
What you're seeing right now, this is part of the eye wall.
This procession of migrants goes back 2 miles.
There is going to be catastrophic damage.
This fire has made a run. You can see those flames shooting up into the sky.
We are on the jam-packed red carpet.
To the right, guys.
So this is the 4th weekend of protest.
Watch ABC News on location for Facebook Watch every day.
Sheriff's office!
We march together.
most powerful stories of our time, anytime. Nightline.
Okay, imagine the morning. I'm talking about a good morning. Imagine starting your day off with friends. What's better than that? You know, like the crazy smart friend who always keeps you in the know. The friend with a huge heart and smile who just makes everything better. Imagine hearing from people who open your eyes and your heart. Imagine knowing what's coming next in the day ahead. Well, I get to live this each morning together with you. Imagine that. How blessed am I? And that's what makes it such a good morning, America.
You're watching a special edition of the Briefing Room here on ABC News Live, coming to you from Detroit, Michigan, and the second presidential primary debate for the Democrats. Great to have you with us. I'm Devin Dwyer. Well, race and racism have become the dominant issues in this Democratic primary and the general election competition against President Trump. The Democrats, of course, trading jabs over civil rights records, busing, criminal sentencing. Tonight, we expect those to come up again in this debate. The president, meanwhile, of course, has launched those racist attacks against four congresswomen of color and the congressman from Baltimore, one of the largest African-American cities in the country. Today, I went to Dearborn, Michigan, just outside Detroit, which has the largest Arab-American community in the country, to find out how this race-based rhetoric is playing outside of Washington and off Twitter.
How about these attacks on the four congresswomen of color, including Rashida Tlaib, one of the first Muslim American women elected to Congress? Did you see those tweets?
Yeah, I've seen those tweets. I think he should probably, he should deal with this stuff like on the, not very publicly, you know what I mean? Like if he has something with them, just deal with them personally. Why should you take this over Twitter?
It doesn't seem to bother you too terribly much, and you don't seem to be paying too much attention, but...
not much, it's politics.
Are you being...
Yeah. So do you follow the president on Twitter?
Oh, God, no. No, I don't.
Yeah. Do you hear about the tweets?
Oh, gosh, yes. How can we not?
I don't want to be...
And, those tweets were certainly, racist without question. And in Dearborn, we have a lot of diversity. Anytime something like that is happening, we're very tuned in, very much aware of it. So we're very dialed in.
What we've heard from voters here is that they're very independent people.
Sure.
How do you think they factor in this issue of race, which is dominating this campaign right now?
I think it's a very important issue. I can't speak for every member of our community, but I think that folks in Dearborn are certainly tuned into that. And race is absolutely a factor. The president has put that really at the front of the political conversation. It's something that deserves a lot of attention. And I think that folks are looking probably for candidates who will speak to that and be open about their own social identities, their own backgrounds, and how they value diversity, in the communities that they want to represent.
Our thanks to Humitos restaurant and owner Sam. Mike Muse is back. Mike, one of the things that struck me, we were talking about this earlier, traveling outside the Washington bubble up into Dearborn, how little people are actually paying attention to the political debate right now. Even some of this racist attacks from President Trump, it's not really registering with a lot of people.
No, it's not. But first of all, the food looked delicious there.
It was amazing. I will say the shawarma was delicious.
The shawarma in Dearborn is fantastic, right? But I think that's what it is. When you go, literally being born and raised in the state of Michigan, you literally go about your 9 to 5, you do your job, you come home, you take care of your family, right? That is your day-to-day. And a lot of times what we talk about in New York City in the media and what we talk about in D.C. in the Beltway doesn't really resonate to everyday individuals that live in the Midwest, right? Like people like myself and families who grew up in that kind of space because you're trying to make it through the day. But I think that it's going to start resonating because of the fact of social media, because of the fact that more young individuals within the state are more attuned to social media, because the state of Michigan has such a large educational universities, institutions within the state, so it begins a trickle-down effect. And then Dearborn is such a special place for the state of Michigan. It's one of the largest Muslim communities that we have. And my concern, Devin, is to go further in terms of the xenophobia effect, and then how does that trickle down to, are we making it safe for the residents, for the state of Michigan, who are of Muslim faith?
Yeah, there seemed to be some concern there about the secondary effects, inspiring other people. A lot of people remembering the Pastor Terry Jones episode from 2012, that Florida pastor who was burning Jean Carans actually came to Dearborn. It was a huge scene during President Obama's re-election campaign. But I was also struck today by the number of eye rolls I got when I did sort of push on these attacks from President Trump, reminded people of them, brought them up. Do you get the sense that sort of the offensive factor has worn off? People just sort of roll their eyes, they sort of dismiss it, and do Democrats need to keep putting that back in voters' faces here?
Yeah, I think you are starting to see a normalization of that, and I've been talking about that a lot, Devin, and that's what concerning me is when we begin to normalize racist rhetoric, right? When we begin to normalize racist rhetoric coming from the Oval Office, which represents our democracy, which represents our government, that's supposed to be for the people, for all the people, and then when you begin to normalize it, it doesn't sit well with individuals because of, again, once you step out of the secondary market, right? Once you step out of your bubble, right? And as you know all too well, Devin, the state of Michigan doesn't all look like Detroit. It doesn't all look like Dearborn. You can literally drive 25 miles and you'll be in a rural town and know it really quickly. And so what happens when those residents go outside their bubble, go outside that safety, and then go into towns like that?
We'll be spending a lot of time in those towns in the months ahead. Michigan is certainly going to be a hot spot in this debate after President Trump won it in 2016. Mike Means, thanks so much for this conversation. We'll be having much more of it. Moving on now, speaking of the heart and soul of Michigan in this area, it is in large part the auto industry. In fact, one small town mayor not far from here told us that motor oil is in the veins of everybody that lives in this area. But over the past few years, notwithstanding the promises of President Trump to bring back the auto industry, the big three automakers, GM, Ford, Fiat, Chrysler, have actually been laying off workers in this part of town. A GM transmission plant not far from here, actually in Warren, Michigan, is actually set to close on Thursday, one of 5 factories that GM will close by the end of the year. And a short time ago, a number of workers there were speaking out. Take a look.
My American dream, the rug was just pulled right from under me. I just bought a house and signed a 30-year mortgage. I don't know where I'm going to pay for that now. We sacrifice a lot and we give a lot to these companies. And for them to just feel like it's just workers, you're nothing, you're nobody, is how I feel that they treat us.
And that factory closing after 17 years of making GM transmissions. For more on this, I want to bring in Kristen Gicek. She's been with us here on the briefing room before. She's a vice president at the Center for Automotive Research, a leading industry analyst and independent one at that. Kristen, thanks so much for coming in. So what's the significance of this plant closure, one of 5 this year for GM? Give us the context around this.
Well, what we're seeing in the auto industry is, we had a peak year in 2016. Sales were reached a peak level, and sales and production have been trending downward since. So 2019 is on par to fall just a little bit more. The United States can make about 14 million vehicles with the existing plants that we have, but we sell 17 million vehicles a year, or a little bit more than that. So there's a gap, and that's largely filled by imported vehicles, and about half of those from Canada and Mexico. So this is an industry that's very dependent on trade, extremely dependent on trade with our neighbors here in North America, Canada and Mexico. And that revision to the NAFTA agreement, and it's not yet passed, is extremely critical both to the companies and to the workers in the plants about how that all will resolve.
And the tariffs, as you've talked about before, have also been something of a damper on the industry. Interesting, though, as you talk about how cyclical the business is, there have been overall gains in auto worker jobs since President Trump came in, about 51,000 by my last check. Many of those for the foreign automakers producing cars and parts here. Can you say, from your perspective, Kristen, that the industry, from a worker perspective, is better off over the past 2 years since this president came in?
Well, you say it's a cyclical industry, and it absolutely is. I grew up in Michigan, in Flint, Michigan, as a matter of fact, and this is an industry that goes up and it goes down. We have seen a slowing in that growth, so it was rocket ship growth out of the 2009 recession. Coming out of that, we were seeing double-digit growth in sales and production and employment It's still growing, but it started to slow. And we've also seen a slowing in investment in this industry in North America and particularly in the United States. And that slowing in investment started to take hold in the beginning of 2016, before we knew who the presidential candidates would be in that election, and certainly before we knew any of the policies of those presidential candidates should they take office. So much of the slowdown and the slowdown in investment activity predated Trump as a candidate.
And what's your big picture, 30,000-foot long view on this, Kristen, before we let you go? For the big three here, Ford, GM, Chrysler, 10 years out, are those industries safe? Are they going to be around, do you think? Will they actually continue to grow as they restructure?
I think there's a whole lot of unknowns right now in this industry for all of the automakers, including those three. We've got an unprecedented amount of uncertainty around trade and tariffs. There's a cyclical downturn perhaps in the works. There's a number of new competitors in the space, Tesla you mentioned earlier, as well as just huge technological change as we move to electrification and automation of the vehicle. So it's a big mix of a lot of uncertainty. And there is going to be an auto industry. There are still going to be vehicles for private ownership in this country. And for the next 5 or 6 years, I can absolutely say those companies that you mentioned are going to be around. In fact, FCA is building a new plant in Detroit that they just announced this year. This should be a very good year for investment because the Detroit Three were negotiating with the UAW, and they'll announce a whole 4 years of investment activity this fall when they reach those tentative agreements with the union.
So a mixed bag 2 years in, 2.5 years into the Trump administration. Certainly a lot of factors out of the president's control. Very dynamic, cyclical industry. Kristen Gicek with the Center for Automotive Research. Always appreciate your analysis, Kristen. Thanks so much for your time. As we talk about the auto industry restructuring, transitioning to new forms of cars, different consumer preferences, shedding workers in the process, a lot of businesses here in Detroit are looking to retrain those workers for new lines of work. And our Ashley Schwartz-Lavares, one of our reporters here at ABC News Live, actually got a closer look at this today. Ashley, great to see you. So you went out, met some of these workers who are transitioning and really charting a course for the future here in the Midwest.
Almost definitely, Devin. I would say that, thank you for having me, by the way, definitely would say that the workers we spoke to today are motivated. They're excited. They feel like jobs are coming back to Detroit. They feel passionate about staying in Detroit. With the GM plant shuttering in Warren, many of them were telling us that they're encouraging their family, their friends to come to Detroit. The jobs are here. The jobs are coming back to Detroit. So there's a real excitement that's palpable in the air. There's an injection of energy that's coming back to Detroit. And I think that they'll say it better than I ever could. Here's a little bit more of what they have to say.
Before I was unemployed, I was at Ford. Still actually laid off from Ford.
It was dry. It was no work. And if you did have work, you better keep that job.
Detroit is actually a hard-working city. We're overlooked, kind of, but we are really dedicated people, It
was very hard. Detroit at work helped me a lot. They went to battle for me, give me this job that I really love.
So I think manufacturing is pretty good in Detroit right now. I can see it coming on the rise a little bit.
A lot of manufacturing job opportunities, I would say in the last few years, has been growing. There's been buildings coming up more and more that are coming back.
Oh, it's awesome right now. I suggest everybody that's interested in manufacturing get into it. It's a great environment to work in.
Actually, I love the heavy lifting. I love the challenge.
I had to learn those skills. I had to learn how to break down welds. I had to learn how to start a robot. I had to learn how to measure the correct way. I'm going to take the skills and just continue to grow.
Since President Trump came to office, yes, I have seen a difference in the environment.
I really don't think President Trump really making a difference on the manufacturing in Detroit because we ourselves is making it happen.
They was building a lot of plants around the city before he got in office, but like I said, a lot of plants have went up.
People are going to invest more inside Detroit to help it all out. I think it's really on the rise to me. I feel it. For me, coming from a small little plant to something like this is awesome.
Detroit is a hard-working city, and that is coming back.
And the manufacturing industry right now is helping a lot. They're opening a lot of doors for us and for us to provide.
My daughter thinks I work too hard. She thinks I work too long, too hard. but she don't understand you have to work.
There's more plants coming around the city. There's one opening up down the street later on in the year, so I just think it's going to keep getting better and better.
And I'm kind of like the top machine operator as a female woman, so it's great. I was down there kicking butt until y'all interrupt.
A real revival underway here in the auto industry. I want to bring in Nicole Sherrard-Freeman, President and CEO of Detroit Employment Solutions, joins us live. Nicole, you and your organization have really been leading the charge on retraining a lot of Detroit's workforce, found so much success. Just let's look no further than the unemployment rate here, just about 5% right now. 10 years ago, it was more than 3 times that. So what's the secret, and what role has the federal government played, if any, in the work that you're doing?
So I will tell you, the secret is putting together employers with job seekers who want real opportunities. And so what we've been able to do through Detroit at Work, and Detroit Employment Solutions Corporation is the engine that runs Detroit at Work, what we've been able to do is really talk to employers about their needs in a different way, understand what's your frontline short-term aim, and how do we help prepare Detroiters for that? So certainly we use federal funding and state funding to do that, but we have the support of philanthropic investors and employer investors as well.
And you're training folks for jobs in healthcare, IT, construction, transportation, manufacturing, a long list, a diverse list at that. What about the wages here? Are these jobs that workers can make a living wage, put them in the middle class?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I mean, clearly, we focus in our work on jobs that pay a living wage. And so to the extent that we can encourage employers to pay $15 an hour or above, we do that. So many of the jobs that are available now, especially those that your prior guests were just speaking of, so with FCA and other auto suppliers, those are good, solid paying jobs. So those start at $14, $15, $16, up to $18, $19 an hour. And are entry level, but with a clear pathway to the middle class. And so not all the jobs pay that, but certainly the preponderance of them does.
And like everybody, a lot of people, at least in this town that we've been talking to, Nicole, watching the debates tonight and tomorrow night, the Democratic candidates coming through. What do you hope to hear from this Democratic field as you tune in these next couple days?
You know, I got to tell you, I hope to hear more about practical plans like the kind we're executing in Detroit. So if you look at ground level in Detroit, if you look at what's happening with business community leadership, the mayor, city council, faith-based organization leaders, we've all come together to figure out how to solve real problems in real practical ways. I sure hope to hear that tonight.
And we'll be watching right alongside you, Nicole Sherrard-Freeman, President and CEO of Detroit Employment Solutions Corporation, the head of Detroit Works. Appreciate your time, Nicole. Thanks so much. Well, a lot more ahead here from Detroit in the spin room at the second Democratic presidential primary debates coming up. The team coverage ahead. I'm Devin Dwyer in Detroit. Stay with us here on ABC News Live right after this.
ABC News, straightforward. In times like these, the news-making events happen here. ABC News.
President Trump meeting face-to-face with one of the world's most brutal dictators, Kim Jongun.
The president.
You trust him? I do trust him, yeah. I think he trusts me, and I trust him.
Ivanka Trump.
I have to ask you about your emails. Your father had taken Hillary Clinton to task for this.
There just is no equivalency.
So the idea of lock her up doesn't apply to you?
No.
Comey.
How strange is it for you to sit here and compare the president to a mob boss?
Very strange. Michelle Obama.
What do you wish you could tell your pre-White House self?
Whew. Melania Trump.
Do you think there's still people there that he can't trust?
Yes.
Still working now?
Yes.
Michael Cohen.
So he's still lying?
Yes.
It's a big statement.
And now, in a year with so much on the line, we're right there.
Good evening tonight from Washington, a very busy news night.
America's #1 news source, ABC News, straightforward.
Sheriff's Office! We march together.
The most powerful stories of our time, anytime. Nightline.
Okay, imagine the morning. I'm talking about a good morning. Imagine starting your day off with friends. What's better than that? You know, like the crazy smart friend who always keeps you in the know. The friend with the huge heart and smile who just makes everything better. Imagine hearing from people who open your eyes and your heart. Imagine knowing what's coming next in the day ahead. Well, I get to live this each morning together with you. Imagine that. How blessed am I? And that's what makes it such a good morning, America.
Welcome back to Detroit ahead of the second Democratic presidential primary debate coming up just a few hours from now here in Detroit as the candidates converge on this city, a lot of them making a stop 70 miles from here in Flint. It was just 5 years ago that the city became a symbol in this country of environmental protection failures and the crumbling infrastructure in so many different parts of this country. We recently went back to Flint to see how that community is faring now, and we found a community deeply distrustful of government and still not drinking the water.
Our water source was switched as a way to save money. And so we went from Lake Huron, which we got through a pipe from Detroit, to going to the Flint River, and corrosion control wasn't put in place. We have an aging infrastructure here in the city of Flint, like every place else almost throughout this country. Lead seeped into the water system. That was what happened as a result of not having corrosion control. Even though the state has told us we could start drinking the water now because of the test results, I'm saying no, I'm not signing off on it yet.
I would say the quality of Flint water matches or exceeds most of the water in the state of Michigan and in the country right now. What happens to it once it gets to the home is kind of out of our control. I can tell you the water coming out of the plant meets all the requirements, whether you trust that. It becomes a matter of personal preference at a certain point.
We're still pulling out lead pipes. You have that potential for lead to leach into the water system. And so we want to err on the side of caution. And if it takes longer and we have to stay on bottled and filtered water, I'd rather do that, because I think people will feel more comfortable when they know we've looked at every single pipe in the city of Flint. So that's the reason we're still doing the bottled and filtered water, but it isn't because we haven't made progress.
Now I'm sitting here waiting. Water give out starts at 10 o'clock. It'll last me about 2 days, maybe, and that's if the kids aren't wasting them. But okay, I think they're getting ready to start the water, start moving the cars. They move the cars and they back them in so they can get ready and everything. You could put it this door.
Can you open the door for me?
Yep.
Water. 2 cases, please.
Okay, yep.
You're all set, sis. God bless you.
Thank you.
Have a good day now.
Yep, you too.
Hold on, let them come right here, though. That's good.
Come on, Doobie. Come on, Shooby Dooby.
You got another one over there, a few more?
One more. All right. Come on, Soupy Doopy.
From 2016 to 2018, initially about 56% of people had fear of using unfiltered water for drinking or cooking, and that's slightly down to about 50% now. I think the remnants of this crisis will be here for years, for decades. It will cross generations, and really because we don't know what the intergenerational impact will be.
Incredible to hear those voices 5 years later. Thanks to Janet Weinstein and Stephanie Ebbs here at ABC News for bringing us that story. I want to bring in now Dr. Mona Hanna-Attisha, a pediatrician, public health advocate who helped uncover the Flint water crisis 5 years ago. She exposed the high lead content in so many children that were living there. Also, Anthony Diaz joins us from Newark, New Jersey. He's the co-founder of the Newark Water Coalition. Talk a little bit more about how Newark is battling part of this lead crisis as well. But Dr. Mona, I want to start with you. Flint was just one community in this fight that you helped, in this crisis rather, that you helped uncover. One study recently found 3,000 communities in our country have lead in the water at higher levels than you found in Flint. That's really something.
Yeah, the story of Flint really was like an iceberg. And once that came apart, we realized that this is not an isolated story. There are communities throughout this nation where our drinking water is not safe. So Flint really just uncovered that, and now we're seeing really ripple effects throughout the nation where we need to do more to protect the drinking water that comes out of our taps.
And some of the biggest cities in America are part of this problem right now. Cleveland, Baltimore, Newark, rural parts of Missouri also suffering this problem. How are authorities identifying these places? Is there, a way for residents across the country to find out if they're affected?
Yeah, so there's not a clear, easy way to find out if you have lead in your plumbing, but by and large, there's lead in a lot of our plumbing. The lead industry was very powerful, not only in plumbing, but also in paint and gasoline, and forced really its use in all of these industries for quite some time, really after we knew that the science of lead was toxic. So not until 1986 did we restrict the use of lead service lines, which are the water pipes that go from the water main to the front of your house. But not until 2014 did we restrict the use of lead in plumbings of fixtures and faucets, especially in brass. So there's lead throughout the infrastructure of our communities, especially in older communities. And we have, as a nation, really failed to invest in that infrastructure to get it up to date. And to get it really to the point where it can fully protect public health and respect the science of what we know, especially about things like lead.
Yeah, I saw by one estimate, millions of miles of lead pipe around the country would need to be replaced to get rid of that threat. It's a really daunting task for sure. Let's bring in Anthony Diaz into this because Newark is one of the cities facing a very high level. We just lost Anthony, unfortunately. So let's go back to you, Dr. Mona, because I wanted to ask about the prognosis of the children in Flint, Michigan. So many of us have followed this story. Our team was up there. Remember the work that you did uncovering this crisis. Do you have a sense of how some of those kids are doing now, what the prognosis is for their health in the wake of the water that they drank?
Sure. So I was seeing patients this morning in clinic in Flint, and the kids that I took care of are amazing, and they're brilliant, and they're smart, and they're beautiful. And really, our kids have driven a movement to share that, they're gonna make a difference in the world. So a lot of our work since the onset of this crisis has been making sure and putting into place model interventions to make sure that our children's outcomes are not impacted by what happened in Flint. So we've been able to put in place like brand new child care centers and Medicaid expansion, home visiting programs, early intervention, all the things that science tells us support the growth and development of children. And through bigger efforts like the Flint Registry, which is this massive public health effort to see how people are doing, we'll soon be able to share how Flint kids are doing and how Flint adults are doing, which everybody wants to know how they're doing. But what we hope to share is that despite this crisis, our interventions were able to mitigate the impact of this exposure.
That's great news. We do have Anthony Diaz back with us from Newark. Anthony, so Newark is one of these cities that's affected right now, kind of the tip of the spear on the country's lead water crisis. Tell us what your organization is doing to curb that. How bad is it in Detroit right now?
It's, well, in Newark, it's really bad. What we're seeing is that the Flint so coming out of the state, you have narrative that everything is water and that all normal. But our organization is really trying to educate the population of Newark. Hey, not everything is fine. Still have residents who think that it's boil water. Not okay. So we're trying to really put...
All right, Anthony, you're breaking up too much. I'm so sorry to have you with us. Anthony Diaz, founder of the Newark Water Coalition, one of the organizations fighting the lead water crisis right now in Newark, the nation's city with the highest lead concentration in the water. Just as a reminder, if you're not familiar with lead poisoning, the EPA says it is odorless, it is tasteless. You can test for it. Go to EPA.gov. Check out how you can find out the water safety of the water that you drink. Well, finally, here in Detroit, I want to bring in our esteemed radio colleague and anchor, political correspondent Aaron Katersky, who will be joining me a little later this evening for the kickoff to our pre-debate coverage. Aaron, good to see you here.
Good to see you too, Devin.
A lot to get into tonight. What are you most looking forward to seeing with this field of 10?
The dynamics on this stage are going to be fascinating, aren't they? To see the two leading liberals, but also these kind of mid-level moderates who are fighting for some kind of traction. How aggressive will they be? And how will Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren respond in a state like Michigan, which is very much in play next go-round.
And it does feel like a fight, a brawl, really, over health care is brewing. The Medicare for All, the Bernie and Warren camp versus the Medicare for All who want it camp, the public option camp. Some of those guys off to the right on the wings of this debate stage, the more moderates in the crowd. There has been a teasing between the two camps on the campaign trail, if you will, ahead of this. And tonight it is sure to break out into the open. Aaron and I will have a pregame show on ABC News Live here, and also on the ABC News Radio Network nationwide. It starts, Aaron, at 7
Eastern Time. So right before the debate, as the candidates hone their quips and their plans, and we'll be there to cover it all.
We'll have a whole team with smart analysis starting at 7 p.m. right here on ABC News Live, ABC News Radio. We will continue to cover the debate and meet you on the backside. Aaron and the team, a full political wrap-up analysis. Aaron, thank you so much. Thank you for watching us here on this special edition of the Briefing Room, coming to you from Detroit, Michigan. Like I said, back here on ABC News Live. Find us on Hulu, Roku, download the app. Stay with us tonight and on ABC News Radio. I'm Devin Dwyer in Detroit, Michigan. We'll see you next time.